This is problem 5 of week 2 HackerRank. It's called Make the Grade, and the problem states that we have a list of correct answers, which is the answer key, and then responses from students, and then we want to find out what the grade is. And then we need to find out what their precise grade is, and we also need to find out like their letter grade. So we need to do two things. And then the input says that we first have the number of test cases, and then for each test case, we have the number of students, and then the answer key, and then we have X more lines where X is the number of students, and then it's their name, and then their answers. So this problem boils down to taking the string that they have and comparing each individual letter to each individual letter of each of these students, and this should run in time. So, and then at the end, we need to output the name of the students, their grade, and then their letter grade. And then the score also has to be rounded to 1 decimal point. So if we look at this problem, let's first input all of the information that we need. So buffered reader, and then we want to read in from system.in. So stream reader system.in. Now we also want a string tokenizer so we can read from the buffer reader. Let's do a new string. br.readLine. All right. So the first input that we get is the number of test cases. So let's first do integer test cases is equal to integer.parse int and then st.next token. And so for each one of these test cases, we have a separate chunk of data. So we're going to need to do one for each one of these test cases. So we run through all the test cases. And then for each one of these test cases, we want to take the next line. And then we want to read in the number of students and then the answer key. So for here, we'll put integer num students is equal to integer.parse int st.next token. And then the next thing we want is the answer key. So we'll say string answer key is equal to st.next token. All right, and then we have num students that we need to go through. So then we'll create another for loop. Int j is equal to 0, j goes to each one of the students. And then for each one of the students, we first want to take the name. So string. Okay, so first we need to take the next line. So we do this. This reads the next line, and then on the next line, we need to take the name of the students and then their answers. So we're going to need two strings here. Separate this a little bit. Okay. The first thing that we need is the name. So the string name. Okay, let's go student. Do st.next token. And then we are going to need their answer key. So it would be string student answers. Do st.next token. Okay, so now we've imported or inputted the name and also the answers, and we also have the answer key. So now we can start comparing and then outputting what we need to output. So what we'll first do is up here, we need to keep in order to count like the score, we need to take the number of correct answers over the total answers. So we need the number of total correct, or the number of total answers there are. So we'll go integer total is equal to answer key dot length, because the length of this answer key or the length of this string here is the number of questions that we need to go through, and that's a total number that we need to divide by. And then we'll have an integer correct, which counts how many correct answers this student has. And so we started off at 0. And then from there on, we just go through, let's go k is equal to 0. It goes through student answers dot length. So we want to go through each one of these letters and then compare it to its corresponding letter on the answer key. If they're correct, then we add one to the variable correct. If we don't do anything. So for each one of those, we say if student answers car at. So this takes the character at point k. So if that character is equal to the corresponding character on the answer key, so answer key dot car at k, if they're equal, then we say the student has gotten a correct answer, and we add one to correct. And then at the very end of this, we want to output a couple of things because we don't want to store. I think it's less efficient if we have to store all the information and then output them at the end, because the problem states that we have to print them in the order presented. We might as well just output the results after each student instead of doing it all at the end. So here we're going to first need to print out the student's name. So go system.out.print, and then we want to output name, and then we want to add a space. And then we want to output the grade or the score that the student got. And so for that, we are going to need to first find out the ratio that they've gotten. So above here, let's calculate their score. So we need integer score is, well, double score, because it can be decimal. Double score is equal to total correct times 100 over total, because we're doing it in a percentage, so we take the ratio and then we have to multiply by 100. But the problem here is that correct, double, and 100 are all integers, so this will return an error because we're trying to find a double and not an integer. So what we do here is we just turn the 100 into 100.0, and so by doing that, it becomes, the top part becomes a double, and bottom becomes an int, or stays an int, and then you'll end up getting a double anyways. So now we have our score and we've printed out our name. So the next thing we should do is print out the score. So we go system.out.printf, and then we want to go percentage.1f. The reason why we do printf is because the problem states that we need to round the student's score to one decimal point. So we use printf and percentage.1f and then comma score to get the to print out score to only one decimal point. Then after that, we need to output the rest of the line, which is just simply a percentage sign, a space, and then the grade. So for here, we'll just print out the percentage and the space because we don't know what the grade is yet. The easiest way to do that is just a bunch of if statements to determine what the grade is or what the score is, and then use that to determine what the letter grade is. So here we'll do, if the score is greater than 90, then we need to output an A because that's considered an A, and that's all we need to do. And then let's do this as a println, because at this point we've ended the line, and then we can move on to the next line. So everything else above here is print or printf, so we don't go on to the next line. And then we say else if score is greater than or equal to 80, then we need to output B. And then we keep going on like that for all the way to F. And the reason why we don't need to go else if score is greater than or equal to 80 and it's less than 90 is because the way Java works is it first looks at the if statements, and if that doesn't work or if that's not true, then it goes on to the next if statement, which means that if we ever reach this if statement, then it's already given that this statement is false, which means that if we reach here, it's never going to be greater than, or yeah, it's never going to be greater than or equal to 90. So we don't need to worry about adding a score is less than 90 there. And then we can keep going. We say if score is greater than or equal to 70, and the same rule applies. We don't need to add anything else. We go system.out.println C. Else if score is greater than or equal to 60, then we output D. And then finally, we can just say else. Else if it's not greater than 90, if it's not greater than 80. So basically, if it's not greater than or equal to 60, then we know that the student has failed. And so basically, this is pretty much just literally going through each one of the lines and then outputting it. There's no real trick to it. Probably the hardest part is the printf part, and figuring out how many decimals places and how to format that. But everything else should be right. So if we run this code here on the test case, let me see, name, student name. Yeah. So if we run this and it should be correct, and then if we submit the code for our two test cases, they should both be correct. Yeah, so both of them are correct.